Now that your workbook's done, you need to print it out, take to a meeting, or have just for reference. Although Excel makes it very easy to simply print out a workbook, there's an assortment of settings and options that you can utilize to fine-tune the way your printout is formatted, and we're going to explore a lot of those in this lesson. To start out, let's just do a simple printing and preview without changing any settings. So to print, we can go to File and Print, and that'll bring up a little dialog that has a little print preview on the left-hand side. And I can scroll through that print preview and see how it'll look. I'm disconnected right now, but if I wasn't, I'd have my options of printers right here. And you see at the bottom left, I have options to print out as a PDF as well. So that's all we're going to look at right here. Let's hit Cancel. Now let's go and look at the print preview on the Layout tab in the print group. This print preview is a little more rich than the one we just saw. The default view is just going to show you the entire document, and if you have a mouse wheel, you can scroll down through it and see what the different pages will look like. A couple of other viewing options you have an elevator slider on the right where you can scroll up and down. Then over on the left-hand side, you have some different viewing options for the print preview. Click that drop down. Right now we've got content only. I can look at thumbnails as well, and that's going to show me a thumbnail for every page of my document so I can get right to it. The next view down here is a table of contents. We really have only one worksheet we're printing out at the current time, so it's only going to show us this one worksheet tab. Highlights and notes you can look at if you've put any of those in there, and a contact sheet. And this will just let us, again, another way similar to thumbnails, I can look at my different pages and quickly go to one if I need to look at it. I can zoom it in a little bit and zoom out. And that's about what we're going to look at on this print preview window. So let's go ahead and close that and continue on. Now when we were in the print preview, there are a few things that we might want to change when we print out. For example, we had 8 pages and we were really hoping to just have 4. The other thing that we had in the print preview is as you scrolled through, after page 1, you don't see the column headings anymore, so you don't know which column you're looking at on subsequent pages. We're going to start seeing how to change some of those options. Well, the first thing we should really do is set the print area, and that's going to be the area that Excel will process to print. Now typically Excel is going to make a guess for you, and it's going to try to print everything on your worksheet. If you want to select a group of cells that's different from what Excel selected, we can simply set that print area ourselves. Let's go ahead and select A1 through J10. Now that those are selected, we want to set our print area. So let's go back to our File menu, go down to the Print Area submenu, and we're going to set the print area. Now let's look at a print preview to see what that did. Sure enough, we're only printing the first 10 rows now. So let's reset that print area. Let's go ahead and click on any cell in our worksheet and hit Control-A to do a Select All. Then we go back to the File and Print Area and set the print area. And now we're back to printing the entire document. This is pretty straightforward, just a couple of points to note. If you don't set a specific print area, again, Excel is going to try to print all the cells on the active worksheet that have data. And the second point is, an Excel worksheet can only have one print area at a time, so you can't set up multiple different print areas. Now let's talk about setting up some print titles. Now print titles are pretty much like a freeze pane for a printout. They enable you to set columns and rows that will repeat themselves at the top of every page of a printout or on the left side of every printout. These are absolutely a must when printing out large tables of information that span multiple pages. So when you get to page 2, 3, 4 or beyond, you still know the name of the column that you're looking at in the printout. Let's start by looking at our print preview again. Let's go to Layout and Preview. And you see on the first page, see how I have the IDs down the left-hand side and the headers across the top. Well, on our second page, we don't have headers across the top anymore. They're gone. And as I scroll down, you see that's still the case. You don't have any of the headers. Now, here's another thing. Because we've got so much data, we're printing also to the right. So now I've got another section of data, which this is actually the first 20 rows or so again, but it's the columns to the right of the main data, so they weren't able to print out because of our page size. It'd be nice if we had that ID field on the left so we knew which item we were looking at. And it gets even worse as I go down here and lose the column headings and the row heading. That's what we'd like to set up with the titles at the top of our page headings. So from the Layout tab, simply click on Repeat Titles. And now what you have here is Print Titles. Now our first choice is Rows to Repeat at the top. Click in here, and then just click on the 1 for the row to repeat at the top. Then for columns to repeat at the left, put your cursor in there. And go over and select the first column. Now I will say that you can do multiple columns. You can click and drag over so I could repeat A through C on the left hand side, or multiple rows at the top. But for this example we just need to keep it simple and have the first column. And then we'll go ahead and click OK. And let's look at our preview again. Now we've got all the IDs down the left and the header across the top. That's just on page 1. Let's see what happens on page 2. See, the header row is still repeated on the next page, so now we can see exactly what we're looking at. As we go down to that case where we get past the end of our data and it's printing out more columns, you see now how the ID column is replicated in the next several pages of printouts. So that's how you set the print titles up in Excel. Next, let's look at orientation. Now orientation, that's really simple. All it does is determine if you want your document printed in portrait or landscape. Okay, so now you're saying what's portrait and what's landscape. Well, portrait is basically like you're looking at the document and holding the piece of paper vertically. So I'm going to click on orientation over here to set that. It's already on portrait. So we'll go ahead and look at the preview again, and we'll reduce it a little. And now you see our data is printed on pages like they're held up vertically. If I want to change that orientation to be landscape, all that does is print out so that we're looking at the page horizontally. And typically this is good if you have a lot more columns you want to display on one page. So now we can move on to selecting the paper size. And that's easy. You just go to the size command, click the drop down arrow, and you got some of your main choices here. The top two are the most popular. Letter size, that's 8.5 by 11. That's what most people print out on. Then the close second is US Legal. And then you move into some other formats that may not be as common. And here you see how we could feed an envelope into a printer. And if I go down here, go to the page setup, I'll get even more options for the page size. If I go to this page tab on page setup and I click on options, that's where I get a lot more paper size choices. Legal, tabloid, a bunch of others. And then I could manage custom sizes too to put in my own, or maybe get some mailing labels. The next thing we're going to talk about is setup of margins. Now what margins are is whenever you set up all your elements of your Excel sheet, the margins are actually space that Excel will force to be blank around the entire document you're going to print out. Now sometimes people just like to have, like an inch border around the whole working area, or you might have a company logo letterhead that's at the top that you need a bigger margin at the top so it catches that. That's kind of some of the reasons you might change margins. Most of the time people just leave them at the default value. But we'll go ahead and click this margins command in the page setup tab, and you've got three basic setups: normal, wide, and narrow. Now to see these better, let's look at the page layout view. See, right now we're in the normal view, so that's kind of a standard margin around the edge. And you see that margin, you can still put a header in there and put more information there. The margin is going to be the area at the very top. So I could go wide, and you see how Excel gave me more space around the document. Or if I go narrow, it really shrunk the distance down. So there's not much space at all now for a margin over here. Next, let's talk about setting page breaks. And we can go ahead and do this in the page layout. It might be kind of interesting to see it here. Now, if you don't set page breaks, Excel will just start a new page when it gets to the end of the data, and it'll print as much as it can on each sheet. But there are times when logically you might want all the records to be together on one page, so you might want to set artificial page breaks in your worksheet. So what I'll do here is I'll start off and just set a page break at row 15. So if I click on A16, when I insert my page break, Excel will insert a page break above the cell I'm on and to the left. And since I'm on the edge, it won't do anything there. But I can go ahead and into breaks, insert a page break. And now, you see now I have a page break here that forces Excel to make a new page right here. Now another thing I said you could do is that Excel will make a page break to the left and above where your cursor is. So let's try another one. Let's go down here and set a page break right there. Well, now what you did, since you set a page break on the columns, is you forced it to only print out the 3 columns to the left of where you set page break. And now you scroll down and the entire worksheet just has the first 3 columns in the first series of pages, and then it has the rest on subsequent pages. And if I want to get rid of the breaks, I can just go here and reset all page breaks and go back to nothing. If I go to the normal view, I can still see page breaks there too. It just won't show it how it's going to look on the printout exactly. So for example, I could put a page break on row 37. Excel shows it as a very soft lit blue line. Now if I want to move that page break, it's really easy. From the normal view, I can just click and drag when I get the icon to look like this, and I can move the page break up a few if I want. Now one of the biggest frustrations when printing worksheets or workbooks can be when almost the entire worksheet prints on one page wide, and then the last column, usually a total or something important, will print all by itself on the next page. No reference information, not contiguous with any other data, and it makes you want to pull your hair out. Well, you can go back to the worksheet and play around with changing the column widths and the fonts and things. There's a much easier way to get Excel to fit your information to the number of pages you want. And that is the scaling feature. That's over here on the right hand side of the layout tab. Let's make sure our worksheet is pretty clean to start with. So let's go ahead to breaks and reset all page breaks. And we'll select our entire table. Make sure that's the set print range. And now we can look at the scale. So if I look at my layout and preview, I see here it goes all the way up to inventory ID, and then extended price and product name are going to print on sheets all by themselves, and that's not good. So what I want to do is I want to scale that down. I'll come over here to the scale, and I can just put in whatever percentage I want. How about starting at 70%? And I'll look at my preview. And that worked. I got inventory ID, extended price, and product name. Now could I make it bigger? Yeah, I can make it bigger past 100% as well. I can go to 200% and then go look at my preview. And now I don't get as many columns on my printout. So let's go back to that 70%. That seemed to be the right percentage. And preview that. And we got everything on there. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 pages, but the 4th page doesn't have a lot of rows on it. Wouldn't it be neat if we could set it to 3? So we could keep playing around. See, we got 1 page of 4. We can keep playing around with the percentage. Maybe if I make it 60%. Now I've got 1 page of 3. Well, that was kind of neat. I was able to pull the percentages down to get it to 3 pages tall by 1 wide. But there's an easier way to do all that. If I go back and put 100% in for the scale, and look at my preview, now I'm back to 10 pages and I don't have everything. Well, I do because I'm in landscape. So let me go ahead and put that back in portrait as well. Now I've got 1 page of 8. Okay, well the percentage was pretty neat, but we can also use this command here called fit to, and we can tell Excel exactly how many pages wide we want the document to be and how many tall. So let's plug in here that I want it no more than 1 page wide and no more than 1 page tall. And we'll preview that. And I've got 1 page of 8. And now that I've clicked both of those, I have to actually click the fit to box to make Excel do that. And you see what happens, Excel went over there and used the scale to pick the right percentage to scale it down automatically. So if I look at this now, I indeed have 1 of 2. It shrunk it down even more, so it's only on 2 pages. Now the reason it did that is that Excel has to shrink proportionally. For example, it can't just shrink the width of the document and not the length. If it shrinks the width by 10%, then the height has to be shrunk by 10% too. So in order to get it on one page wide, we had to shrink the data down a lot more. And let's go back and make that 100%. Now the last thing we're going to talk about is grid lines and headings. We talked about those in another section where we saw how we could turn the headings on and off with the view area of the layout tab and turn the grid lines on and off. Now by default, the grid lines and the headings are on when you're working in your worksheet. Conversely, when you're printing, the grid lines and headings by default are turned off because most people don't want to see grid lines in their printout. If I look at my preview, see I don't see any grid lines there. And I see the heading I put in my worksheet, but I don't see A, B, C, D. I don't see the actual column headings. So I can go ahead and turn both those on for printing. And then you'll see Excel will put those on to the final printout. Now I've got the grid lines in there, and I've got the column headings and the row headings. Now when people ask, why would anybody want to do this? Well, I'll admit it is pretty rare, but there are times where you might be in a working session with some people on a worksheet, and you want to actually have the spreadsheet printed out on paper, but know exactly what column you're referencing when you're mocking it up or maybe changing some values. So we've gone over a lot in this section. In printing out worksheets in Excel, it could and should be fairly simple. Most of the time, you're just going to go up and click your print button, and that'll be that. It'll be good enough. But it is good to keep in mind how many options you can choose from and set to fine-tune your printed product. Just be aware of them, and also the fact that sometimes what looks good on a computer screen doesn't necessarily make a good printout